Released on Easter weekend 1999. The Matrix was a science fiction blockbuster from the Wachowskis that was quite literally bursting at the celluloid with symbology, esoteric allegory, subliminal imagery and hidden meanings, etc. So much so, you could compile an entire book on the subjects and themes consistently prevalent throughout the entire massively successful trilogy. But it is the first of the trilogy that really commands the attention with regards to the allegorical events of the Matrix, which address moral, spiritual, political and religious themes, conveying overall an immense tool of subliminal mass awareness that was obviously an intention. The allegory of the movie can be interpreted in many different ways. However, they all share the same essence and motive. Awakening. The film's protagonist, Neo, the One, is found to be disconnected from reality, a loner, completely unaware that he is actually a prisoner of the illusory, virtual confines that he ignorantly perceives as actual tangible reality. An instant subliminal reference to the evident disparity and disconnection prevalent within modern society. As a result of our restricted, inhibited, imprisoned minds that are constantly reinforced and exacerbated by the glitz, gloss, grandeur and gratification of consumption, materialism and the ever-increasing influence of social media. In the opening scenes of the movie, Neo is introduced to us as a loner searching for somebody named Morpheus, God of Dreams, indicating that Neo is looking for something unconscious, intangible, immaterial. He is a seeker seeking fulfillment, enlightenment or illumination. He is looking for something outside of the confines of his perceived and accepted reality, searching for an answer to a nagging question that he simply cannot place nor conceptualize. Neo is told to follow the White Rabbit, which is an obvious allegorical acknowledgement to Alice in Wonderland, in itself a subliminally esoteric tale dealing with themes such as self-discovery and awakening. Alice followed the White Rabbit down the hole and was introduced to a paradoxical reality, which existed beyond the perimeter and boundaries of her accustomed and accepted ideas of matter and perception. Neo, like Alice, follows the White Rabbit through the looking glass, finally discovering Morpheus, who appears as his spiritual guide, aiming to awaken Neo to the stark reality of his virtual imprisonment. Morpheus seeks to free Neo's mind and enlighten him as to his actual capabilities and potentials, once he has freed himself from the knots and binds of his own limited perceptions. Morpheus says to Neo, "You are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or touch or taste, a prison for your mind." Elaborating once again on the fact that as a species we are not physically bound, but mentally, forcing its audience to ask fundamental questions about the limitations that modern industrial and corporate society places on the mind. And what might we be capable of if we were liberated of this form of bondage, achieved with the reorientation of one's whole life and purpose? Morpheus offers to Neo the option of remaining a slave, or of being liberated from the simulation of the Matrix, thus revealing to Neo the true nature and essence of reality through the eyes of an illuminated, cleansed perception. When Neo is unplugged from the Matrix, he appears submerged in a womb-like chamber, furled in a foetal position, without hair, symbolic of his spiritual birth. We see his head is completely bald, perhaps a reference to Buddhism and the commitment to the holy life, and has initial problems opening his eyes as he has never used them before. Once again a symbolic reference to his previous life spent in the darkness of ignorance. "I once was blind, but now I see." The world Neo has been reborn into is bland, colorless and non-stimulant, completely devoid of any trinket material objects and meaningless domestic luxuries, indicating the absence of desire, a clear requisite, condition and state of being necessary for initiates who endeavor towards illuminated works. His food and clothes become simple and humble. Again an indication of the absence of desire, of ego, possibly indicating the importance of abstinence, restraint, discipline and dedication in the pursuit of higher consciousness. He begins to learn that the realm he has become born into, the real, is at war with the simulated material, matter-based world of his previous imprisonment and concealment. Symbolic of the conflict, discord and disparity between the illusion of the physical and the reality of the spiritual, the war between consciousness and matter, the difficulties encountered when searching for a union of mind, spirit and body, the esoteric mysticism of the Trinity, provided in the movie as the female love interest, Trinity, who ultimately initiates the opening of higher consciousness, with a kiss no less, indicating an intimacy between Neo and the importance of the Trinity. I digress. Shortly after his spiritual birth, Morpheus reveals to him the truth of his previous state of non-existence, in a prestige that has a significant impact on Neo. The revelation unveiled by Morpheus causes him to vomit violently, and immediately after his dramatic convulsions, Neo passes out on the deck of their craft. It was revealed to Neo that, from birth, he has been a slave to a system that uses his entire being for power. That power being the energy generated and absorbed from the human body, in order to perpetuate the eternal existence of the sinister machines that created the Matrix, specifically for the purpose of control, concealing the insidiousness of their nature, whilst keeping humanity in a consistent state of ignorance. An unbelievably accurate resemblance to modern life, cinematically pertaining to our small, precious allotment of irretrievable time spent in this material realm, in the relentless servitude of authoritative, dominating hierarchies that seek to utilize the best years of the being for commerce, economy, monotonous and meaningless societal models of structure that only truly benefit those few, machine-like mechanisms at the top of the pyramid, parading as man, forever consuming the human soul. The message of the movie is clear. In reality, that power, a subliminal hint towards the power of a certain elite cabal, facilitated by the collective and global accumulation of money. Money that we so blindly and passionately pursue within the darkness of ignorance to the apex of our gift of life. Perpetuated by the illusions of materialism and consumption, brother and sister of globalization and corporatism, the almighty religion of the future, our blind devotion to acquisition. Our actual living, breathing, matrix. A subliminal imitation of real life. We exist as a superficial necessity. A commodity that helps to exacerbate the current monetary system, keeping our economy in thriving, privileged positions, so our country can continue as players on the increasingly bizarre global stage, ensuring the eternal power scale tilts in favor of those that benefit the most. We assume our freedoms, because at present we do nothing that directly challenges the status quo. We are happy in blissful ignorance. This is the reason for Neo's upsetting reaction to what Morpheus had to teach him about the truth of his previous life. The fact that he had absolutely no control over it, nor knowledge of it at any single point, and that even if he knew then the harsh reality of his deceitful confinement, would he still want liberating from it? Perhaps this is the source of Neo's disgust that he suspected it all along. But being faced with the vacuous truth of its reality, he simply could not conceptualize the levels of insidiousness and evil. He in that instant dies to his past life, and becomes truly born into his new state of being, a graduation, so to speak, of spiritual awareness. Neo fully appreciates, for the first time, the terrifying gravity of the former landscape he inhabited. So much so, he is overwhelmed with the disbelief of his previous incarceration. And when this perturbing phase of initiation is over, he begins his training, under the tutelage and watchful eye of his ever-present spirit guide, Morpheus. Morpheus continuously pushes, stimulates and urges Neo to test and challenge the physical boundaries of this perceivable reality all around him, reassuring him all the while that things are not as they appear, in a hope that Neo will eventually, once and for all, attain the level of understanding when the doors of perception have become cleansed, and he is finally able to completely free his mind, abandoning perceived notions and ideologies that he has been conditioned from birth not to question. He informs Neo of the destructive forces of the enigmatic agents that can appear as everyone and no one, who hold all the keys and guard all the doors, that Neo will inevitably have to engage fight and defeat, if he is to ever find the answers, salvation and eventual freedom that he and Morpheus seeks. Everyone and no one. The agents can be viewed, first and foremost, as a personification of the ego, and the unsavory emotional alliances tied to this force such as pride, desire, bravado, etc. The many masks of the ego. Our outward perception of the self, which is a reflection and product of the accumulation of influences and cultures of one's environment and experience. We at times feel satisfaction and equal dissatisfaction with the self. But this is due to a conflicting and complex duality of ideas and superficial beliefs of how one wishes to view the self, and one's idealistic version of the self. If the kind of mask that would bring sufficient self-fulfillment isn't fitting a prescribed ideal, that we simply adopt and choose to gratify one's worth or purpose, we merely adopt another, opposed to engaging the true destructive source of our continuous, mysterious discontent. The ego is an accumulation of personalities, opinions and reaction to experience, or interaction with experience. Our association and relationship with the ego is at present a dangerously overindulgent act of fruitless interaction. When you consider for a moment its existential link with the ever-widening material emphasis placed on our current social and cultural narrative, and the soulless exploits such an atmosphere exacerbates, we engage and refer to the intangible ego today more than ever, as this current social climate has provided ideal, stimulating surroundings for such destructive illusions of the psyche to bloom and thrive, placing more emphasis on our gym body, for example, than how we actually feel inside, about our true selves, that we really have no idea about, because we're far too busy chasing conformity, immediate self-gratification and status. In these hollow attempts at self-appeasement, we have become experts at judging others, of perceiving and pointing fault in fellow beings, but far from being apt at pointing such honest and critical high-powered perceptions at our own selves, pursuing self-improvement and discipline, in an attempt to free our consciousness of the trappings of the ego. The agents manifest as the ego, that we must battle and vanquish at all cost, in order to save and liberate our true selves from the superficial abyss of complete annihilation. And of course, enlightenment begins with the dissolution of the ultimate illusion that is ego, our false, misguided sense of self, thus unlocking all the doors, and finding all the answers. In the final scene of the movie we see Neo take to the skies in full flight. The obvious impossibility of this feat, expressing the new extent of his physical, as well as metaphysical power. He is now not merely completely liberated from the confines of the Matrix, but apparently also possesses the ability to bend the very fabric of time and space, attaining a sort of godlike status within this world, where the perimeters of reality are no longer applicable. This is indicative of the enlightened, who, upon reaching a level of complete dissociation from the superficial materialism of the physical realm, are capable of observing the deeper mechanisms of life, and the catastrophic disconnection with spirit, with nature, with the earth, synonymous with the absorbent elasticity, and extrasensory perception of the purged and initiated connected mind, and the boundaries and restrictions that its newfound consciousness is capable of transcending at will. The limitless power of the enlightened, a direct reference to transcendence, astral projection, and a nod to the exploration of the ethereal and interstellar realms, that opens its gates to those in possession of the higher states of being. The disconnection of basic humanity that prevails within modern life is only gaining momentum, fooled relentlessly by the engrossing spectacles of the furious, ridiculous pandemonium that is the current world stage. And so it ominously seems. There is no stopping the corrupting media machine, the warmongering, mass ignorance and powerful urges towards instant self-satisfaction and indulgence. The destruction of the environment and ecosystems as a result of overfarming, over-resourcing, as well as the countless other disgusting atrocities and horrors taking place right now within our precious world each and every day. It's a frightening realization that no longer than 75 years ago, the most brutal, Disgusting and callous atrocities known to the history of man were taking place. In gratuitous displays of senseless barbarity, predominantly on mainland Europe and of course spreading later on throughout the rest of the world. World War II cost the innocent lives of countless millions. Murdered in production line droves by the very instruments and ignorance which threatened to once again engulf humanity within its beguiling, calamitous and deadly ideology, which is an advocate of violent and senseless slaughter. Little over half a century ago, our species existed in a time when the most spectacular displays of cruelty were being carried out indiscriminately, as a result of prejudice and conquest, ideals and ambitions, as well as the insatiable lust for personal power and collective dominance. All forces which manifest from the same source, all evils that inhabit the same essence and space consistently, without falter through every epoch of human existence. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? Alexander Solzhenitsyn. 1973. The vulgar animal nature and instinct of man, that presides within the lowest chakra, a representation of our oldest form of self and being, that evolution and consciousness longs after liberation from, the part of ourselves that we cling to and revere as an actual necessity or root to our character, some survival prerequisite essential to our progression and growth as a species of animals with animal desires, mentalities and instincts, the part of ourselves that we must allow to die an agonizing death, that we may be reborn and begin life with a fresh perspective, a renewed perception just like Neo, awakening to the harsh fabric of the Matrix, suddenly with the capabilities to penetrate its very heart with an analytical clarity and spiritual scrutiny that serves only the evolution of the soul, opposed to the evolution of acquisition and material prosperity, if we consider our past as it should be, within the capacity and atmosphere of learning and growth, as mistakes to be avoided and as demonstrations of how to better refine civilization and calculate events with more wisdom and compassion. Then we could at least begin to turn an evolutionary page. We could put the civil back into civilization where we no longer point the finger of blame at the TV or to the heavens, but at ourselves. People are indeed far too busy looking up. Whether that is viewed in a political or spiritual context is irrespective of the point. To start looking within. Concentrate on polishing the murky interior of the spirit in small successions of daily ritual, so that the divine light may at last shine at the base of our obscured understanding. And at last by its illumination, we can begin to view the extent of the fractures that threaten to extinguish forever our precious chance at something greater than ourselves, our chance of peace, harmony, and a global equilibrium that we have not enjoyed on this planet for thousands of years. This has been an excerpt from the book, Eternal Pleasures of the Dead, Poems, Tales and Philosophy, by A Ellis. Please subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching.